All right, well, I'm joined on the mechanics of transportation and IanStewartCycles with an amazing freelancer, podcaster, BBC presenter of some kind, Katy Madgwick. She's a freelance writer, as I mentioned. She's the head of creators of Domestique Cycling. She's written for Cyclist Magazine, CyclingNews, TNT Sports. She has a podcast that she co-hosts called On Your Bike podcast and has contributed to the BBC Radio. I could go on with attributes about you because you have quite the resume, but I want to thank you for talking to me today, specifically about the Tour de France, Katie.
Well, thanks, Ian. Thanks for having me on, and thank you for the glittering introduction. Could you write my CV for me, please? Because
Yeah,
you make it sound amazing.
well, you deserve it. Being a freelancer, both of us being freelancers at time, we could use all the help we could get. I think in
Yeah.
show that's I think that's not to get off topic already, but I feel like that's the hardest thing for us to do sometimes is to list like, look at all the things I'm doing. This is why you should hire me because, I could do the job.
Yeah, 100%. I absolutely get what you mean. Yeah, it's like you feel like you're throwing credentials at people sometimes in a big old pile, and it's like, yeah, it's hard. Freelancing is a tough gig, but
Yeah,
passion,
we
passion.
won't even get into taxes. I interviewed Jez Cox, who's a presenter for TNT Sports sometimes, and we talked about the work that he does in freelancing, and it's just incredible, and how taxes are taken out. But that's a whole other topic.
Let's not go there.
Yeah,
I do want
I
to
know.
think about it.
It's the same here. So obviously we're in a time difference. It's a rest day for the Tour de France. It's the afternoon for you. It's still early morning for me. I haven't had my morning extra cup of tea that I like to do. We're going to break down the Tour de France. But first, before we even do that, I just want to get your thoughts on why bike racing is one of the best sports in the world. I have to say one of the best sports because I know for my son, football is up there, and football meaning soccer here, but football there is also considered one of the best sports. So why do you think bike racing is one of the best sports in the world?
That's a great question. And I do wonder it myself sometimes, how is this sport the one that's sort of captured me and dragged me in and isn't letting go? I was a football fan, soccer fan for a lot of years, and I kind of fell out of love with the sport a little bit because of the money and I don't know, just the attitude within the sport felt like it was going in a negative direction. And I got into cycling about, I don't know, 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more, and on the wave of kind of British success at first, and then I feel like I'm still learning. I think the beauty about cycling for me is it's a sport where there's so much to know, there's so much to learn, there's so many different riders, teams, different types of race, different personalities, and different kind of strategies and tactics. Basically, whatever you're into in terms of sport, if you like the pure athleticism, it's there. If you like speed and racing and excitement, it's there. If you like strategy and tactics and kind of the deeper stuff, you've got it in spades. And also, to add to that, we've got the most stunning arenas in the world. Beautiful
Ex-
mountains, incredible landscapes, and you can watch all that kind of rolling across your screen, and you don't even have to go anywhere. You can just chill and enjoy, the spectacular landscapes that Europe has to offer, and sometimes beyond.
Yeah, Katie, I think that's one of the reasons why I got into cycling a few years ago, really more seriously than I've been. I've always appreciated cycling. I've been a cyclist for years and years, but I just got into the sport, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And I'll touch on the Tour de France, but I agree that cycling is one of the best sports purely because of everything you just said. But first and foremost, the arena is spectacular. I will never go to Turkey, but to see the Tour de Turkey, what a beautiful country. You know, the Giro d'Italia women's just finished. The parts that they race there are just stunning. If you're watching a football match, basketball or rugby, anything, you're stuck in the arena. That's fine, and you're there for you're there for 90 minutes, give or take. Cycling, you have hours and hours of the sport that you could really dive into. And I think when I started watching the Tour de France, I didn't understand first why is this a 5 hour race that I'm watching? How am I supposed to do anything else for the day? Um, when there's something going on, I didn't understand anything. And so I'll ask you some of the questions that I had in the beginning of the Tour de France, but we'll continue with the theme of best. Why is the Tour de France considered the best race when it comes to cycling?
It's the race with the most history, and as such, over the years, it's built up an incredible level of status in the sport. It's the race that top riders want to win the most. It contains the most prestige. It's a Grand Slam in tennis. It's your Super Bowl in football. It's all those top prizes that you can name in sport. It's got that level of prestige and status. So all the riders who come through the ranks, their ultimate goal and dream is to go to the Tour de France and to compete, whether it's for a stage or for the general classification, which I'm sure we'll kind of break down a little bit soon. But yeah, it's just the ultimate goal. So yeah, that began 112 years ago, I think, if I've got my numbers right. And that history is just ingrained into the sport. All the biggest stories in the sport's history stem from that race and from incredible feats of endurance and athleticism that have unfolded across the topography of France, which lends itself so beautifully to bike racing.
Yeah, France is just incredibly stunning. The fact when they do mountain climbs and flat stages, you just get to see so much of that. I think the history for me is also really fascinating, just how long it goes back. When you're on some of the stages, the towns that they go through will honor specific riders that maybe were born there or have some connection to that too, which you don't really see in a lot of sports. I mean, if there's a legitimate footballer who recently passed away, they might show a montage or something, but I feel like cycling really honors its history.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah, and I think that's another beautiful thing about the landscape and the way it passes through so many areas is that you do get touch points with the race's history every year. Each year that they visit a famous mountain climb, you'll be able to think back to other people that you've seen do it on the footage, or the race commentators will have fascinating facts about the other times it was used, and it brings an element of three-dimensionality that perhaps other sports don't have.
Yeah. So for novices out there, explain the race. Explain why. We're on a rest day. I'll explain right now. We're on what's called not we, but the riders are taking a rest day, which is great for them. It's a 3-week race, and they get 2 or 3 rest days, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And this is the first one. So explain like an overview of what the Tour de France is and why it's 3 weeks long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds mad. Like it's the only sport that lasts 3 weeks. You get we love cricket here in the UK. A test match is 5 days long, and sometimes people who don't understand cricket can't really understand why that is a 5-day competition. But cycling, it really is a Tour of France. I mean, obviously they can't visit every single corner, but it's over 3,000 kilometres, nearly 3,500. So it takes time to get all the way around, to visit all the different areas that they want to visit. Primarily, the reason it's so long is to test their riders' endurance, to test their fitness, their speed, their bike handling skills, their ability to strategize. It's a long race because it's designed to find the best rider. And as you know, you can go out for a lovely day on the bike, cover a fair amount of kilometres, and it could be tiring, or it also can be quite relaxing. So they've got to make it hard, and by riding fast, they make it hard, and by including challenges like the high mountains, time trials, and all different kinds of tests. We're looking for who can withstand the rigours of that challenge the best over the course of 3 full weeks. So it's rewarding consistency as well as pure speed or pure climbing ability.
Yeah, and the races, as you mentioned, are broken down, of course, by hill climbs and time trials. So the teams. Let's talk about teams for a minute. Teams, I don't know how many teams are on the tour. That's out of my brain power. I know who they are, but I know they're like the top echelon of the team. So walk us through how many teams there are, and then I'll ask a question relating to that.
Okay. So you've got 23 teams this year, which is a bigger number than usual. They added an extra team this year for reasons that I won't go into because it's a bit arbitrary and quite boring actually for listeners who are just getting into the sport. But yes, 23 teams, so quite a lot. 8 riders per team, and within each team, well, for a start, you'll have some teams that are going after the general classification, which is the yellow jersey, the overall win. You'll have other teams who have got their eye on stage wins only, but whether that's through sprints or different types of riders who want to try and make a mark on the race, but perhaps aren't in it for the full 3-week prize. And within each team, you'll have riders who are the leaders, and the other riders will have different specialisms, but they'll primarily be helping the leaders of the team. So they'll be that, whether that means riding at the front of the pack to like give them a rest, helping with just day-to-day stuff like fetching water bottles and nutrition from the team car. You always have a road captain within each team who's delivering messages or organising resources. You know, team captain job is the same in a bike team. But yeah, so that's the basics of how teams function.
Yeah, so the way teams are broken down, you know, you have someone who's strong at climbing. So if there's a climbing day, it's not going to be the yellow jersey wear necessarily unless they're really known for being a climber. It might be a sprint person, you know, on a sprint day, right? So it's their speciality of what makes their teams unique, as you mentioned. In terms of those teams too, I want to throw out some phrases so you could explain to people what a domestique is.
Yeah, so a domestique means a helper. It's a rider who's specifically there to serve their leader in some of the ways that I mentioned before. But yeah, they're not there to win the race, they're just there to help. And the role is vital, absolutely vital.
Yeah, and I think with teams too, they're really, you know, their domestiques are proud to be a domestique. You think, coming from an American sports background, you know, we think of individual players as, you know, everyone wanting the same thing. They want to get the touchdown, they want to win, they want to do things, and they don't really, I think, highlight their team role. But domestiques and other people on the team are really excited when their leader gets the jersey or wins the stage. I think that's a huge difference in terms of American sports versus a world sport like cycling.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's really hard for people to understand the dynamics of how teams work because it is such a strange division between a team sport and an individual sport. Only one rider can cross the line first and raise their arms and celebrate that victory, you would think. But then you do see those team shots where they're all celebrating as if it was a team sport and as if they had just won the Super Bowl. And that's because everyone's effort is what makes the victory. One person gets to celebrate it and add it to their list of wins, but it is the team, a product of the team's hard work. So yes, they do celebrate, and sometimes, especially in sprints, you can quite often see a rider who's helped the winner sit up and celebrate a bit further back, and that's always cool to see because it just reminds you that, you know, it's not just one person on their own. They need a village essentially to succeed.
Yeah, and that person celebrating in the back, you know, if you're not watching the race, you might forget that person in the back was pulling the other rider, which is basically the riders drafting behind because they're able to save energy. You know, they keep their main riders protected in the peloton, which uses less energy. I always used to get frustrated when I first started watching bike races that the lead out person who, you know, there's only a kilometer left or, you know, 500 meters left, and they're going, I'm like, oh, this person's going to win it. And then they pull off to the side. I was like, well, what are you doing?
Yeah, I know what you mean. It is weird. When you first approach cycling, you think the person in the front is going to win the race because that's how racing works, right? But no, that's not how it works. So that's the beauty of cycling is if you can be enticed in by something that appeals to you, then all these other layers and aspects open up and you start to learn and pick up more as you go along. And it's a nice kind of gradual process. You don't have to know everything all at once to be able to appreciate a bike race. But yeah, the role those lead out riders play is amazing. But you do wonder, like, don't they just want to keep going? But yeah. They've timed their peak power to come like 200 meters before the line, and then their sprinter can get up to the highest speed and deliver their peak power. So just as the domestiques for climbers ride at the front in the first part of the mountain and then the climber takes over, it's the same just in miniature for a sprint.
Yeah, it's crazy too. I won't even get into the fact that I get frustrated with, the Giro d'Italia women's race just finished, and Leona Lippert was riding behind. Oh, who I forgot who just won, like who just won. Right, she was riding behind like 500 meters left to go, and the rider in front, and I can't think of who it is now. It's gonna drive me crazy, but kept flicking her arm like, "Hey, take over!" And Lippert's like, "Nah, I'm not going to take over." And of course, Lippert won that stage. And I know that happens in men's races too. And we don't need to talk about it, but part of me gets frustrated. Like, I know you're allowed to do that, but you sat back, saving your energy. And the poor person in front, maybe Anna van der Breggen or whoever was like, "Yeah, I'm pulling you, and now I don't have any energy to finish the race." Like,
Well,
that's
yeah,
great.
the tactics can get very spicy indeed, and
Yeah,
it's quite political, and fans will rage over it. Like if someone hasn't been perceived to be doing their full level of work. But yeah, that's when you get a breakaway. Like we might as well dive into that while we're here.
yeah,
You get maybe a rider from I don't know however many teams, 6, 8, 10,
yeah,
and they have to form a miniature team. If they want to stay away from the peloton who are riding behind, then they have to work together, and so they have a chance of like a 1 in 10 chance of winning the day, as opposed to a 1 in 200 odd if they're back in the bunch. So they have to form these little alliances, which at the closer they get to the finish line, the more likely they are to break down. And then they start looking at one another, and the pace comes out, and the peloton catch up. And yeah, it's fascinating stuff. It really is to watch these kind of battles play out, and how sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
yeah. When it doesn't work, which I know we can get into the weeds a little bit, but since I get to talk to someone who loves bike racing like I do, it does get into the weeds where they're down to the last little bit and they've been out in the breakaway for the whole time, and they slow down and they start playing a little cat and mouse game. And you're like, you need to keep going because the peloton is literally 10, 15 seconds behind you. You better stop messing around. And if you want to win this stage, you better go.
It's when egos start to come into play then. There's
Yeah.
certainly some races have been lost, but because of egos just looking at each other and going, no, it's not my job to pull. Well, you've
Yeah.
both thrown it away then, haven't you?
Yeah. It's got to be so frustrating. I've almost wanted to call out Demi Vollering for when I started following her a few years ago. I'm like, oh, you seem to do this a lot. But I mean, I have huge respect, for her and all the teams. Let's go. We'll go back to the tour. So, with the tour too, when I first started watching, I would get confused because I would think, oh, the stage winner is the yellow jersey wearer. Oh, the stage winner who's won 3 times, 3 stages. Why aren't they in the yellow jersey? So can you kind of walk through why that is? I mean, I understand why, but why isn't the person winning the race the yellow jersey wearer?
Yeah, it's probably the most common query for a new fan, and I totally understand why. And I also had the same misgivings when I first started watching. Like, we keep seeing this person win. Why aren't they winning the race overall? The yellow jersey is awarded to the rider who has the lowest cumulative time over the 3 weeks. So when you see a rider win a stage, yes, they're ahead on that day. But if you watch them throughout the 3 weeks, if they win one stage, there'll be 20 stages when they're either they'll be behind the stage winner, but a lot of the time by quite some distance. And because the stage win is just judged on who crosses the line first, fair and square. But the yellow jersey is judged on time. So you have to be the fastest over the 3 weeks. So you just consistently. So you have had in the past where maybe a yellow jersey or at least a race leader in a race will not win a stage. It doesn't happen anymore, really, especially not with Tadej Pogacar in the frame. But
Yeah, that's a whole.
he loves a stage win, and the best riders are good enough to win stages and to have the fastest time overall. But traditionally, a GC rider, a guy going for the yellow, would sit in the bunch, get that drafting the effects that you mentioned from their domestiques, and hide away, and only pop out just at the end, just to make sure they're ahead of the rest, thereby conserving energy so that they can keep going for that full 3 week period without suffering mega fatigue and just sort of crashing and burning. which is why a lot of the time when you see a guy win a stage, like we've seen, say Ben Healy, for example, won a stage last week, and he worked really hard yesterday as well to get yellow. You'll see riders who've done that huge effort then completely drop out the back of the race the next day, and just to recoup their energy, thereby accumulating such a large amount of time that they are no longer in contention for yellow. It becomes they're only there for like that one stage, and a lot of riders who aren't in the GC competition will look at the book of stages and say, that's the one I want to go for, and that's all they'll do in the whole race. They'll support their team leader, and then on the one day that they've said that's the day for me, they'll head off up the road and just hope for the best.
Yeah, so it's really all about time too, which is interesting if we're talking strictly about Ben Healy's yellow jersey win and stage win. I think Tadej Pogačar is about 29 seconds behind still in the GC, and watching that stage where Healy was doing amazing, an amazing job, and Tadej and the peloton started to go a little bit faster. I'm thinking, okay, now's your chance, and then they kind of held back, and I'm thinking, Tadej, did you just think I could get another day? Like there's still 2 weeks of racing. Not to get in the mind of Tadej, but I don't know. It's just, I think that's one of the tactics that I love about cycling is that, if you're just watching it for a pure win, who's winning, etc. Eventually you're going to get into the chess match of it all. And I think Tadej holding back, he probably could have taken off, which he's been known to do on mountain climbs, and just bolt. He could have done that 29 seconds, I think, in a heartbeat.
Yeah, definitely. And then I think that's when some of the other tactics come into play. It's not a bad thing for him to lose the yellow jersey. It might seem bad on the surface of it because he's no longer the race leader. But because this is it's a marathon, not a sprint, to use the adage. Yeah. He knows that half a minute, he can make that up in the blink of an eye because he's such a quality rider. So when they get to the really high mountains, he will not be able to, Ben Healy will not be able to keep up with Pogačar, and he'll make up minutes on Healy. It's Vingegaard, his closest rival, who he's got to worry about, but they haven't even entered the high mountains yet. So this is, as you say, it's still early moves in the chess. You've got pawns. Maybe Healy could be seen as a bit of a pawn. He takes the heat off of Tadej for a few days by wearing the yellow jersey. His team have to do all the pulling at the front of the peloton. They've got to control the race, and Tadej's team UAE get to sit back and have a little bit of a rest, which they'll be very grateful for, I think, after the hard work they've been doing so far.
Yeah. So, and the teams too, just to give not a comparison, but to give people an understanding of these teams, there's a mix of teams owned by American companies. I think, ES is American, Little Trek, I think, is American. Yeah. And then there's others, that are owned elsewhere too. Teams are vastly important, obviously, because one, they fund what the riders are doing, but I kind of want to ask you about sponsorship too. So can you explain to people when they see a breakaway of two riders that maybe aren't the most popular, I know what the reasoning is sometimes why they're out in front. Can you kind of tell people why they want to get out in front of a breakaway sometimes?
Yeah, okay, sure. So the reason sponsors invest in cycling teams is to get their brand out there the same way any company invests in any sport, really. If it's a stadium sport, you want to have your brand on the jersey. And just like in cycling, if your brand's on the jersey and your rider is up the road, they get loads of camera time because the camera constantly switches between breakaway and peloton. So traditionally with these smaller teams, they'll be sent up the road, even if it's doomed to fail. That doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. They're not necessarily there to win the day, but they are there to create value for their sponsors. So by being up the road, that sponsor's jersey is getting on the screen like 50% of the day, which is a great return on investment.
Yeah, so it is really important for, if people don't understand. I think American viewers, if they watch race car driving, it's the same kind of thing. I've kept you for quite a while, and I know you're busy on this rest day. I do want to ask you, you were there at the tour. Can you explain, we're talking about a three week race where the arena is wide open. So fans get full access basically to these riders. Can you kind of explain that to people that might aren't used to seeing fans at the side of a road yelling at a rider? Or and I'll get into my pet peeves, but you are also there, and I would love to hear how that went.
Yeah, it was fascinating actually, and I have been to some other bike races, and the tour's completely different. A number of people, the amount of attention, the amount of press, media, TV. It's a circus. It's intense, and I think it's hard to describe it accurately without really being there. I think it's any bike race, however, as you say, you have that access. You can stand on the roadside, and yes, there are barriers in certain places at finish lines and at the start, but if you're out, say for example the race passes through your town, you can just pop out of your house, cheer on the race with no separation between you and riders going at 80 kilometers an hour if it's downhill, for example, and then just go back in your house again. It's
Yeah.
quite crazy. My advice would be go and see a bike race, because it's really, really just immense to see how fast they go. Go to a mountain because they're going slower, so you see more.
Mhm.
But ultimately, if you go to a bike race, you're not seeing any of that bike race aside from that 5 minutes or 10 seconds that they pass by, depending on whether they're going uphill or downhill, essentially. But you get a slice of the atmosphere, which is just unparalleled, I'd say. You go
Yeah.
home from a bike race and you turn on the TV to find out what's happened in the race you've just been to see. It's like walking into a football stadium and saying, "Oh, that was a good pass," and walking back out again.
Yeah.
But it's worth it because it's just hearing the sounds, seeing those riders up close and the incredible equipment that they're on, and it's really impressive. But yeah, the Tour de France was unlike any other bike race I've been to, just for the sheer, just massiveness of it, just the hugeness, the number of people, and yeah, it was pretty chaotic.
Wow. And I would recommend if you are going to a bike race for the first time, maybe don't do a mountain. I mean, a mountain climb with lots of people, maybe pick your own little quiet area of a mountain, because the mountain climbs, if you're watching a race, could get pretty chaotic in terms for the rider because
In
of,
in France for sure. I've been to the Tour of Britain. It's you can go up to a random hill in the Peak Districts, and there's nobody there but sheep, so you get a great view. But yes, it's very. If you go to Alpe d'Huez or one of the big climbs in France, it's mobbed.
I don't even understand how the riders could focus on the road when the fans literally are patting them on the back sometimes, which again is one of my pet peeves, that and
Yeah,
lighting off smoke flares
same.
on a hill. That's
Yeah, don't
just
touch the riders and don't.
don't touch the riders. Don't light off flares because use your brain. If you need oxygen, you don't want to breathe in smoke when you're climbing up a hill, and you've been riding already for 4 hours.
You would think that that would make
Yeah.
sense.
Um, so you had a great time there. I could talk to you about racing a lot, but it's been about a half an hour, and I know you have a lot to do. What else is on your docket for the rest of the tour? I mean, you just published an article today in Cyclist Magazine, or was it Cycling News that you put out today?
Cycling news, yeah.
So
Yeah.
what's next for you?
So I'm working throughout the tour, both for Domestique, who are covering the tour on their website in depth, so I definitely check them out because they've got very full coverage. I'm also doing a daily YouTube podcast with Cade Media, covering the day's highlights, which is really good fun and quite a nice, light-hearted way to quickly catch up. It's about half an hour a day of just picking out the key points, following through the race narratives, and a few fun bits and bobs along the way. So that's really good fun as well.
I'll put that link in my description so people can check you out. And then also they need to check out your podcast, On Your Bike podcast, and look for your reporting everywhere. I really want to get into women's cycling. I know it just to promote the Tour de France, there is a women's version coming up almost immediately after the men's Tour de France, or does it start? Doesn't it? I think it starts almost near the end of the men's. if I'm
Yeah,
not
there's
mistaken.
the final weekend of the men's is also the first weekend of the women's. So there's 2 days when they each have a stage. So one day the women's stage is first and the men's is second, and then the other way around. They're not in the same place, but they've
Right.
obviously timed the broadcast so that we can watch both, which is great because it means you get that momentum flowing through, and then you can carry on watching the women's race continue on into the next week. So yeah, I 100% recommend that you stick around and keep watching for the women's racing, because the women's peloton is bigger, stronger, deeper than it's ever been. There's a lot of strong competition there, so it's going to be a zinger.
Yeah, women's cycling needs all the support it could get. It's grown immensely over the past few years, and any women's cycling race that you could watch, I highly recommend, because, I mean, the men's is great as well. You have all these superstars, but the women's has just exploded in terms of so many amazing riders and amazing athletes. So any time to support women's cycling, I highly recommend it.
Same here.
Um,
100%.
yeah. Well, Katy Madgwick, I really appreciate you coming on IanStewartCycles and the Mechanics of Transportation to explain to people about the Tour de France. And my last question, by the way, is it's ending at the Champs-Élysées, right? Okay, good. I just have to double check, because I should know off the top of my head, but I know it. Didn't they do one year where they didn't end there, I think?
Yeah, so last year they finished in Nice because of the Paris Olympics. Was
Right, that's right.
logistically, Paris was locked down, getting ready for the Olympics. The tour happened slightly earlier to allow for that, but it meant they couldn't have their traditional finale in the Champs-Élysées, which they are going back to this year, but with a difference. We've got the climb, well, there's a climb in Paris heading towards the Champs-Élysées, which they don't usually use, and they used it in the Olympics, and it's like a little punchy cobbled climb, and they're going around it a couple of times. It's going to make the final stage a little bit more interesting than the usual sprint procession. So yeah, I think they want to keep the competition going all the way to the end, which is nice to see.
Interesting. Well, I appreciate the update on that. It's a beautiful stage. If you could watch any of it, I would recommend, be sure to catch the last little part. But watch it wherever you can. Watch highlights. There's highlights on YouTube galore. But subscribe to something to watch the Tour de France, because it is really spectacular race, and it's a great way to get into racing. Well, Katy, thanks for taking the time over where you're at. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Ian. It's been great.
Thanks.